Hey everyone, welcome back to Gun Tote Minnesotan. Today I'm obviously talking about the ZEISS S3 4 to 25 first focal plane mil configuration scope with illumination in the reticle. I have actually used this scope a huge amount. It's been on no less than 4, I think it might have actually been 5 rifles that I've kept it on for months at a time, and I'm going to probably have a 6th rifle here to throw it on right after this review. I want to try it on one more. But I've run this optic past a mile, over a mile, and I've shot it very, very close. 15, 20 yards on gophers, like right over behind me, right over here. There's gophers all the time. Right here, I have run it on 3 power at extended distances and close. I've run it on 25 power, really close, and extended distances. I've used all of the tracking all the way out, maxed it out to the full range plus holdover, and I've also dialed none and just used the reticle for extreme holds at extreme distance. So I do feel like whether it's center fire or rim fire or even some types of pellet guns, I've got a really good handle on the experience of the scope. I just need to have a quick proviso about one thing. I'm not an optics manufacturer. I don't have a skilled background in engineering, nor do I understand optics engineering as well as many other people out there. I've got a couple pals and friends who I think they do a great job with that, and I'm not going to try to step into their role or sit in there or find myself in their shoes in any sort of way. So you can listen to those guys when you want to talk about optical engineering and how they achieved the performance that they did, or what they did which internally limited this design. I'll touch on the fringes of that, but I'm not going to focus on it exclusively because I want to talk about the actual use of the product and how it functioned for me in different applications. First, I should probably talk about as a pellet rifle optic. This is probably overkill for a lot of people, but not for me. Since guns is my hobby, I don't have a boat, I don't have a side-by-side, I don't have a fancy car. I have some guns and I have some optics that I really like, and so good optics go on my guns, and I don't like to limit myself with crappy optics most of the time. So on my pellet rifles even, I tend to get really good optics. I don't know that this is reverse recoil rated. I did not try it on a piston gun, but I did try it on some other guns, and I loved it. I absolutely loved it. I threw on some infinity or no limit rings, rather, the no limit rings from FX on a pellet rifle, and I maxed this sucker out and held over. I was shooting over 300 yards with a pumper, and this thing is amazing. One thing to notice is as you get towards that extended range, so I have 39 mils available to me in this one. I'm going to stop right around there. Just a touch past 39, but I usually stop right at 39. That's max range. When I get to max range, the image starts to clip. So that happened on my pellet rifles, doing ridiculous things that I'm sure nobody else on the internet wants to do. But I have fun doing stuff like that, and I wanted to max it out and see if the tracking was true, reliable, consistent from time to time. And I do think that at the end of range of travel, I think you lose a little bit, actually. And I've noticed that with 22, I think the tracking isn't perfectly clean at the bottom half and the top half. I had to test that quite a bit, and I also tested the ZEISS S3 6 to 36, and I found the same thing, which makes sense because it's basically the same design. At the ends of range of travel, it seems to not be perfectly predictable or the exact same. So it is what it is. That's just been my experience. If you think it's completely different and you tested it on paper and you know exactly what it is, you go right ahead. But I just didn't find that to be the case. But within the normal ranges of travel and even closer to the, let's say, the 20% line, my data, it lined up. So it was good data. Didn't have tracking error there, and I was able to test this against a couple other optics at those same distances, and it seems like top 20%, bottom 20%, still pretty good. It's when I get lower than that 20% of range of travel, yeah, it seems like it has an error. Return to zero, perfect. Every single time, never, ever, ever had an issue with return to zero. So you have to add that into the equation. So I'm having some error at the lower portions when I'm going past the normal range of travel for almost anybody, and I'm still getting a good return to zero. So is what it is. I don't notice any shift. It could be a tenth or two occasionally, but I do actually test stuff like that. I do put on paper on my own time, and it's kind of it's a labor of love for me. So I don't even record it. I do it on my own, and I just double check, is this thing still tracking? And now that I've dialed on this a huge amount, repeatedly, many times, over and over again. You know what? It still tracks true on paper. When I put this into a block and go put some paper behind me here and get it exactly 100 yards, got a tape on the ground, run all the way over there and make sure everything lines up. I'm really happy with the subtensions. They seem to line up. And then also the tracking does appear to be true and comes back to 0, which is probably one of the most concerning things. If a scope doesn't return back to 0 and you're a competition shooter, which I do like a little bit, if you're a competition shooter, it's really concerning to have a scope that doesn't come back to 0. And over time, starting to lose a tenth here or there, and you got to take your scope back out and find out, is it the ammo, is it the rifle, is it the temperature, is it the way I'm shooting, is it the scope? I hate those extra variables. I just want to be able to trust the optic to come back to 0. And functionally, this does. I don't have an issue with return to 0. So that's as much as I probably need to say for reliability of the internal components with the tracking mechanism. The erector is doing exactly what it should, and I think 4 to 25 is an excellent range to be using with that kind of elevation available. I don't need the 6 to 36 S3. One thing that is a little different, and it's just kind of weird that it worked out this way. This is a 50 millimeter objective. The 6 to 36 has a 56 millimeter objective. The 6 to 36 has about 32 mils. It's actually like 32.3, but it has about 32 mils of internal travel. And when I max that optic out, I'm gonna tell you, the image does appear to me to be superior to the 4 to 25. The 4 to 25 is good. It's good glass. It's bright enough for the most part, but I get a little bit of image clipping once I start traveling to those extreme ends of range. And I've seen this in the Track Toric. I've seen it in the ZEISS. What else did I see it in? Okay, there's one other brand that has not brought theirs to market, but they're going to, and I saw it in that one as well. That just at ends of range of travel, the image starts to, get a little eggy, or it starts to reduce. You have a little shadow, and eye box is sensitive on full power. A couple things that they're all going to have in common. But the 6 to 36 does not clip the image. It does not reduce the image as much as the 4 to 25 is. The 6 to 36 is barely noticeable. Actually, I was really impressed with how good the image looks at ends of range of travel. Glass still looks pretty decent, and that's the higher magnification optic, so I did not anticipate that. But it has a 56 millimeter objective, both 34 millimeter tubes, but this one just doesn't look quite as good when you do that. So the configuration there, again, I'll leave it to the optics engineers to discuss why it is that the image is clipping a little bit here. Remember that the range of travel is significantly more in the 4 to 25. That's going to have a huge effect on why I'm seeing that reduction there, but I'm not going to go down that road. I'm just telling you it is something to notice. That being said, I still shoot this out past 600 yards. This 22 right here, rimfire. And so I'm at 40, typically it's 41 mils, depends what the temperature is. Here in Minnesota, that changes rapidly. But around 41 mils, so I can actually engage targets really far with this and still be okay with the image. The eye box is really touchy when I'm up at 25 power. It's not quite as bright. I do think the 636 has some advantages there, but it doesn't have as much travel. And so in order to use more of that 32 mils of range of travel, I have to do some unique things with the S3 6 to 36 versus the 4 to 25, which I just have a 50 MOA rail right here from Area 419. I've had a Triggers by Scar 55 MOA rail there, and I just noticed that the image quality, it wasn't as good with the 55 MOA rail. And since I need this for hunting as well as competition shooting, I wanted to optimize the image just by a little bit. And believe it or not, the difference between the 55 MOA rail and the 50 MOA rail is noticeable. It's somewhere in there where I just think the image is a little bit better for my 0 and then extended range when I actually go way out there. There's just something about that. And so one more time, I'll just say I'm going to leave that to the optics engineers to discuss how that is. And you can have fun in the comments and tell me all about that. I'm just telling you what my experience is and what I noticed in actually using it. I like the shape, or the footprint rather, of this optic. It's pretty good. I have some, ironically, I have Arkin scope cap covers on here. They work good. Just work really good, and I'm willing to give them a plug and throw that in there. Sorry, ZEISS, for double promoting here, but I like the ZEISS a lot. I like these flip caps a lot. They've just been really reliable in the winter, and I'm used to flip caps actually breaking in the winter very often. These haven't broken yet in several seasons, so I've put those on here. The footprint, okay, back to that. Gonna focus. Footprint. The footprint is really good. It's not a huge optic. It's not overly heavy in my opinion. I actually like heavy optics on some rifles, but on this guy here, I don't need it to be extra heavy. In fact, light is generally good on this rifle because it tends to be my backpack rifle. I can fold this up and take the can off the end and fit this in a small package. And so a lighter optic is good. A 50 millimeter objective is perfect. I don't need anything different. And as you can tell here, clearance is pretty darn close. If it was a center fire, that would be closer than I need to achieve. I would probably have higher rings if it was a center fire, and I did. Like I had it on an RPR Magnum, 300 PRC, and you know what, I'm just weaving different stories in here, but I guess it is what it is. I just randomly thought, you know what, I haven't done this video and I need to sit down and talk about it. I had it on RPR Magnum, and I was shooting at 1,780 yards, or was it 90 yards? Whatever, a little over a mile. Shooting a little over a mile with this optic. Only needed 18 mils of elevation, but on that RPR, because I had a, let's see, who was it? Somebody sent out a rail, and I need to get this right. It was Anarchy Outdoors. That's who it was. Anarchy Outdoors, go check that video out and check out their aftermarket support for RPR gear because it's awesome. But I think they sent me a 40 or 45 MOA rail with a bubble level in the back. Really liked it. This on top of that, and I was a little bit close with low rings. It probably was way too close. The barrel heat would have been excessive for transfer up to the objective bell and the body of the scope. So what I did is I actually put it in high rings on that RPR Magnum, if I remember right. So the mediums or in-betweens. Put it up much higher just for clearance. Even with the 50 millimeter objective, I found that necessary. But I achieved an excellent image. And so I've shot it very close, air guns, 22s, low power, and then I ran it out to a little past a mile, and I was so pleased with the image and the lack of mirage that I was getting compared to a couple other optics. I'm not sure why that was, but I had less mirage with this scope on there, and maybe it was barrel transfer or lack of barrel transfer heat I was seeing on that versus other rifles I was running that day. I was running all of them at 16 to 24 power for a little while, and I was seeing my misses perfectly. I felt like I was shooting at 300 yards, like point blank distances. And I was so surprised. I kept looking through the glass as if it should be difficult to see my misses at a mile. And that was not my experience whatsoever. With the 4 to 25 here on 16 power, or when I was up closer to 25, 24 power, eye box wasn't technically difficult because I was in the prone. I was fixed in one position, so that didn't bother me. And the reticle was pretty decent from 16 power up. I think the reticle is too small in this. It needs to be 0.075. That would just be my opinion. And it's small. But at 16 to 25 power, I could make sure that that reticle dot was visible enough. It contrasted with my target, even with impacts on it. And with the windage, it didn't even matter because I was holding, I think, what was it, between 4 and 6 mils with a 300 PRC. That's how windy it was. And so I was using lateral lines anyways. Okay, back to the actual magnification here. 16 to 25 power at a mile. Perfect. What a great image for it's not an economy scope. I suppose this is a mid-tier scope. It's definitely not a tier 1 scope. Let's just make sure that's really clear. If you're thinking, hey, maybe this is going to replace my X, Y, and Z tier 1 scope. No, it's not. No, this isn't a tier 1 scope. I don't think the tracking is exactly true. I don't think the turrets are designed to feel like a tier 1 scope. I don't think the image is going to be good enough to be a tier 1 scope. But dang, is it close to that for, maybe it's a third of the price of a few tier 1 scopes when you actually get it on sale. And I did not, pay full price, so I'm not going to pretend that I don't have a bias here. I probably have a little bit of a bias, but I'm willing to tell the exact truth as I see it with using the scope. And I'm going to tell you the glass is pretty darn good for that price point. I've seen these go on sale for around $1,600, and that's what I would recommend. Obviously, there's a few other competitors with similarities. I like the ZEISS reticle more. Let me take a few minutes to talk about that, as well as magnification. Okay, with the magnification ring here, I have chosen to put it on the furthest left option. There are 3 pillars or risers here, and I've opted to put it on here. I prefer the screw-in kind like this rather than the pinching kind. So good job, ZEISS, on this. I put it on the furthest left so it doesn't interfere with my bolt, and you can't see it from here, but I can actually run it all the way to 25 power without running into the other side. But if I have it on middle or the far left, I'm going to run into bolts. So better on an auto gun maybe over here, but not for a bolt action. The reticle. ZFI, is that what it is? The ZFI reticle? Kind of forget. But this reticle is a pretty darn good reticle, with the caveat that I think the center dot is too small. Those of you who like center dots or really fine dots, you're just not going to have that issue, and you're going to think it's perfect and great. I suppose my vision just isn't good enough. And so I think that a 0.04 size dot, I believe that's what it is in this one, because I don't think they went as small as 0.03. And those scopes are ridiculous. I think 0.03 that's wild. I can only ever contrast well with those if I'm at full power on those scopes, and I just don't like it on first focal planes especially. So this first focal plane, 0.04 I think is the right size that they went with, and it's just too small. But at 16 to 25 power, I can make it work really well. I do shoot 22 comps at 10 or 12 power with it, and it works. I just feel like I hunt for it a little bit, or I work for it, even though my eye is drawn to the center of the glass because of the lateral lines and the horizontal lines, which are pretty effective. They're good. They're a little more bold and thick and contrasty. They help you get to the center, but I still look for that center dot. And when you're shooting like a KYL rack, let's say you're even shooting at 600 yards, you're shooting triangles, for PRS, and you get to that smallest triangle, and it's been beat up all day. It's been hit 4 or 5 times. The last match I was shooting with another optic that had a larger center dot, and I was able to quickly get that center dot in the shadow on a triangle and still have enough contrast because of the excellent quality of the glass on that particular optic. This has very good glass, but unless I'm up closer to that 16 and 20 power, I just have a hard time contrasting, and I take a second more than I want to, which in competitions where there's 2 minutes maybe for your stage, you just don't want to be wasting time trying to focus in on that reticle. I want it to be a little more natural for my eye and not stress or work for it quite as much. So a little critique there, but now let me follow that up with what I love about this scope. I love the holdovers, and not everybody's going to agree with me there, but I love the way that they did the windage. I like the placement of the numerical indicators within the Christmas tree there, and then with the bold, thick lines being where they are on low power, it works for me. On hunting, especially at close distances, on 4 power, those lines work for me. And then if you add in that ZEISS has some of the best illumination on the market for magnified power optics, like higher magnification optics, their illumination is phenomenal. It's so good. And so I can get a really nice contrasty image again in those hunting scenarios on low power, close targets. 15 yards away. And the parallax on this, I should go back and talk about that. The parallax on this goes down to 15 meters, so I can actually make a good quality shot, off this tripod especially. Thank you to Sunway Photo, and thank you to my friend Max for helping me get a hold of this. But I can make a really close shot on game when it happens, when I get that opportunity, and I don't have parallax error, which is confidence boosting, I suppose, because if you know about parallax, you know that the closer you are, the more parallax error is going to cost you. It's going to be an error, and the touchiness where your head is and all that. There's just so many variables there, especially on a bolt gun where I might lift my head up and move things around. I don't want to have a 25-yard parallax on a hunting gun where I'm going to shoot things at 15 yards. I want a 15-yard parallax, and this achieves that with all of the other features. Massive internal elevation, as well as windage, actually. It's a good amount. And then magnification range, which is as much as I ever need for this application. I have a couple higher end scopes. I have a few higher magnification scopes. I have some like 5 to 40s and some other things on rifles I don't really talk about, but those, it's like a real specific application, and I don't compete with those. I really don't. The truth is I compete with more of the 5 to 25 range of magnification, maybe a couple 6 to 36s that I've shown, and I really like those. But when I'm shooting them, I'm not shooting them at 30 or 36 power. I'm shooting them on 25 power, and with this one, it's doable around that 16 power. I can shoot all day long right around there. Field of view is going to be sufficient. Depth of field is sufficient. I don't think depth of field is way better than other scopes, actually. I'm probably not enough of an expert to talk further about that, but I just compared a few different optics. I put like a Night Force, I put this out, I put a Schmidt out once from somebody else's, wasn't mine, a ZCO, what were the other ones? So there's like a couple tier ones. Oh, there's a Tangent in there, there's an Element in there. What was the other one? Can't remember the other one. Oh, there's a Collis. Yeah, okay, that was the lineup. Yeah, and then the last was Collis. So we put a few of them out, and I didn't think that the depth of field was the best in this one, but the price point was, basically the best out of that lineup. Oh, that other one was a Zero Tech. That was the next one. I'm so sorry. I keep forgetting. We compared a whole bunch of scopes at once with a few fellas, and then I had a Zero Tech in there. And this was not the best of all of them with depth of field, but it was really good, and the price point was actually a little better than most of them. Not to mention, I could actually shoot further with this than the others, like all of them. A couple other things I can talk about. Having red and green illumination is cool. I don't have to have it that way, but it's really cool, and it functions. It works great. I haven't, if I'm thinking correctly, I don't think I've tried this with night vision. At least I don't remember trying it with night vision, but there's night vision compatible settings in there, and then there's just daylight bright. Basically, like wintertime when it's sunny out, there's snow everywhere, and it's so bright sometimes. Black contrasts well, but sometimes a little bit of color doesn't hurt, and so I'll throw on illumination, and it works. It works really good. There's off in between on all of the illumination settings. It's done perfectly, in my opinion, except for I think the cap to the battery compartment is just a touch loose. Even though I will crank on it, if I just use my hands, it's just a touch loose. It comes loose too easily. That would be my opinion about that. It doesn't seem to seal up quite the way I want it to. No issues, no water issues. I've shot this in the rain, unfortunately, downpouring rain. No issues, worked fine. Parallax wheel is excellent. It doesn't have numbers on it, but it does have growing bars with some indicators on there that you could use as reference points. You could definitely write in on your own something on there. Or just put a piece of white tape around there and write in whatever you need to if that's your way of doing it. But for me, even in competitions, not a chance. I do not just quickly jump to those things. Most of the time, I can very quickly dial this back and forth and get to where I need to be, where parallax is not horrible. I'm not having huge parallax error. Even in competition, I'll just quickly adjust that. So I don't have white tape on there. I don't need it. And I also don't turret tape the top turret. It's just not the way I do it. I typically either have a data card off to the side here, or I'll wear an armband sometimes with my data on there. I just don't feel the need to turret tape this, but some guys will do that. If you're shooting really far, turret tape has limitations as well. All right. I can appreciate a few other things about the scope, like the smoothness of all the features. Everything is just pretty smooth. Parallax is smooth. I don't feel like it's like, kind of jerking back and forth a little bit too much. The diopter setting is pretty nice and smooth. It's not, if I remember right, it's not a locking diopter. I kind of like locking diopters actually, but it's not one of those. Hasn't been an issue because I have this thing like gummed up on there. It's probably not much of a deal breaker for anybody or deal maker for anybody, but I actually really like the locking windage style and also the numerical indicator for 0 on the windage. I like the placement of that because I can see it well, and occasionally I've had to dial windage. It depends what kind of competition I'm doing or what shooting I'm doing. Occasionally I've had to dial for windage, and there was a particular shoot where I was shooting really, really far, and I decided that day the wind was so bad and so consistent that we did dial for windage that day, which is very odd for me. But it was nice to be able to have big, easy-to-read numbers. It has left and right marked on the turret, so you know which direction it's going, and then getting back to 0 is very easy to see without taking my face off the gun, because most of this stuff gets blocked if I try to look in here. It's just not visible, but I can see up here really well. So that's cool, ZEISS. I hope you keep doing that. In fact, I would like to see this on the S5 line. If you would switch the numerical indicators to be up a little bit higher, that 45 degree mark on the turret, or on the scope body rather, right on the bulb here, that would be a better placement in my mind. I don't mind that these are non-locking turrets for the top because they're not so easy to turn that they're just going to slip on their own. I think that's ridiculous. And then, I don't know, in competitions, I don't even want to have to lift and move that most of the time. I'm fine with just getting to them and turning. The zero stop works exactly how it should. One thing I can say, it's not so much a criticism, but it's just something I noticed. I generally like the turrets. They're reliable, like I already mentioned. Reliability isn't an issue. Tactileness, I've definitely felt better. Even at the price point, I've felt better. I've also felt worse. So these are probably, pretty good, but not the top, and they're certainly better than a lot that are similar price point, just a little, I don't know, they're not real crunchy, and they're not real thuddy either. There's just kind of this in-between feel, but reliability is what I care about, and so that's fine. I won't complain about it because it gives me a massive amount of internal travel, so it's not a deal breaker for me. I just know what I like for turrets, and I like the shape and the design. I would love to see them go toolless for the turret reset, and I think everybody needs to do that. I think Light Optics Works needs to make that more prevalent for scopes that are coming out of there with their in-house models. Just get everything toolless. That's the future. It is so much more convenient. I really can't say enough how much I appreciate that. So the turret cap coming off with the little Allens, and ZEISS uses very small sizes for things. Also on the S5, let's just change these out for some bigger hardware, actually. I prefer this zero stop over the S5. The S5 series, it's a good scope, it's a good clear glass, but it's just kind of a weird zero stop method, and setting it is confusing to some people. This is pretty straightforward. I guess I prefer this overall, but both will work, both will function the way they're supposed to. I just think, turret feel, some of the process isn't quite there for me for the next generation. It's good for this generation, it's just not good for the next generation where competition is going to be happening. The numbers on here as well, it doesn't have a second revolution of numbers, so you can track with that. That's been really useful. If you're going to shoot pretty far with smaller calibers, it's really nice to have a second revolution. It's not an indicator, but it's a way of seeing where you're at in that second revolution, and I get up to 3 revolutions actually. On this one, I'm past 3 revolutions. The numbers have half mil increments, so it's like big number 3, then little 3.5, and big number 4. I like that. I think it's a good idea. So yeah, it's pretty well done. Overall, I like it, and it's been probably one of my favorite scopes to shoot just because it's so versatile. It does bring a lot of features to the market at a price point that's less common, and a glass image resolution, brightness, illumination, guys, the stuff I already talked about. It brings a lot together with these features for the price, and that's why I think this is competitive. This is why I like it. All of that to say there's a few competitors out there that do things differently. They might even do some things a little bit better in what they asked of this design company to come out with and how they specified their scope to look and operate versus this one. But it comes down to reticle for me. The reticle in this is more optimized for my kind of shooting rather than the others, which are competitors and are very similar but not the same. This has been a really random video. I've been meaning to make a video for a long time, and I'm not doing any shooting right now because I've shot with this so many times. I've done so many videos with it. I don't need to do more. If I could only pick between this and the 6-36, I'm going with this every single time, even though the 6-36 has a slightly better image, a 56mm objective, a couple other things about it that are just slightly different. I'm actually going to go with this one every time because of the features that it brings and the value of having, roughly 45-ish, 44 usable mils of internal E. That's impressive, and it's still competitive right now, a couple years after the scope came out. Thanks, guys, for watching. If you have any comments or you just disagree vehemently and I'm such an idiot, you can go ahead and tell me down in the comments. I'll let you do it because I don't get everything right, and sometimes I change my own opinions about things. But thus far, on several rifles, shooting it very, very close, shooting it very, very far, shooting it in competition, shooting it for plinking or paper, these are my opinions thus far. And ZEISS, well done. I think you're pushing the market in the right direction, and the S3, the S5 have been excellent breakouts from your other traditional lines of scopes, and I hope that you continue to push on this edge, because you're bringing things to the market and you're helping manufacturers produce optics in a way that I think represents people who actually shoot guns. So thanks for that. Take it for what it is, and I'll see you guys in the next video.